We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now, Trish?
Yay! Hi!
All right, I've got to start all over. Hi, my name is Paul Sterling. I am the author of Argue Less, Love More. I am a relationship and intimacy coach, and I'm joined by a fellow love coach and relationship and intimacy coach, and an amazing senior coach at Love Coach Academy, Trish Wright. And we are talking about the three, not one. Most people confuse it, but we're talking about the 3 shades of intimacy tonight. So Trish, you want to do an introduction on yourself and how you got to become a intimacy expert, an intimacy expert, whatever the hell that is. That's where Bubba talks about intimacy. Y'all gonna get some intimacy tonight.
Tonight. Well, it started a long, long time ago when I wanted to bring more connection into my love and sex life. And at this point in my life, I was young and didn't really understand how relationships work, right? So of course I dove into Tantra and BDSM, and that still didn't work. So then I started to understand more about relationship and more about connection and more about, communication skills. That's what brought me to this. And of course, taking Scott's love coaching curriculum, mentorship, and just graduating from Sex Coach University's, huge program. I'm now a certified sex coach. So here I am.
Wow. Yeah, and it's an interesting journey. We're going to offer you an idea of what intimacy is. And I think some of you are going to be really shocked at what it is, because it's like so many people say they want it, and yet so few have it. And it's elusive. And one of my mentors, a guy named Marshall Rosenberg, I'm going to give you his definition of it in a little bit, and it will surprise you. It will take a minute to absorb it and then think about it. So just so everybody knows out there in Facebook land, I'm watching the comments. I interact with you, and hello, Alexi, and if you want to tell us where you're calling in from. And if there's something that's an aha that you get from Trish or from me, we'd love it if you would send that out there and make a comment. And at the end, if you really feel like you got a lot of value from this, share it with people and share it on your site. So let's just take a little bit of a look at what people want in relationships. And then we're going to dive into what is intimacy. So in relationships, what I've noticed from coaching couples for over 25 years. Oh, hi, James. Jane Blonde from Canada is with us today, and LA. So let's just a quick shout out. There we go. There's our Manitoba contingency and our LA contingency. All right. So what people want in relationships. They want them to keep getting better and better, a state of gratitude. And where great relationships are, easy to win, hard to lose. When they start to fall apart, we start to take each other for granted. It becomes easy to lose, hard to win. And it's somewhere down here. I call it the point of no return. So relationships are great when communication is great and intimacy is great. And so we are going to look at what does it actually take to create intimacy. And what I want to do is tell you what it looks like when it goes wrong first. And then we're going to tap into Trish's wisdom. So take a second, look at where you are. This is not intimacy. This is relationships in general. Where are you? Where do you want to be? So crisis, conflict, stuck in a rut, good, great. Now, this is if you're even in a relationship. What we're talking about today, it can apply whether you're in a relationship with somebody else or in a relationship with yourself. This is something self-love, self-intimacy. Part of the reason I have Trish on the call, because she is friggin' expert in that area. And it's such a critical one, because part of the way you can look at this is these 5 different relationships with someone else, but you can look at the same 5 relationships or different zones with yourself. Are you in a great relationship with yourself? Good. Stuck in a rut, constant conflict, or in a total crisis? And anything you want to say about that one, Trish, before I bounce to the next slide?
Well, I mean, I do. And I think that I just want to say that it's okay to be in all of those places. Like, it's okay to be in crisis, conflict, in a rut, in good or great relationships. It's okay to be in those places in yourself and within your relationship. And if you want to change where you're at, if you're in crisis, conflict, and in a rut, that you can, if you're willing and wanting and coachable, get into good and great places as well, with relationships with yourself as well as relationships with others. That's what I can say.
Yeah. And so the 3 different shades of relationship, I really wanted to drag it out a little bit, so like the punchline, but I'm going to say what they are, and then we're going to dive into them. It's emotional, physical, and sexual. Emotional, physical, sexual. And a lot of times we collapse them and we think that when we're talking about intimacy, the only thing we're talking about is sex. And it's not accurate at all. In fact, a lot of times for the feminine, and I'll let the feminine speak for themselves in a second here, but for the feminine, if they don't feel like their heart, if you don't value their heart, they don't want to open their body to you. And that's where the emotional intimacy comes in. And then touch is the physical intimacy. And then sexual intimacy is sort of like if you've got emotional, physical, and then it moves into sexual. So anything you want to say about that before I dive into what screws it up in advance?
Well, I love your try series here, and I actually would love to expand on it a little. So I often think about intimacy in the realm of mind, energy, body, emotions, spirit, and sexuality. Like I actually compartmentalize in this way that looks like, hey, I want to be intimate with you on a mental level where we can really dive into concepts and really get into that place, because I love those places. But that doesn't always touch my emotion. And you're absolutely correct. And I think that it goes both ways too. Like there's the sapiosexuality, but the demisexuality really in the realm of like connecting with one's emotional connection to their sexuality. And a lot of men have that as well, have that demisexuality. Have you heard this term before?
I haven't heard it. You're using a bunch of different terms, and I'm pretty familiar with Tantra. You've used that, but we might want to explain it. My video on Tantra and sacred sexuality has been seen. Okay, this is me bragging. I'll be vulnerable here. I'm bragging. It's been seen like 6 million times on YouTube. So there's that one. But there's a lot about sex and sexuality I don't understand. I'm wondering if we should save it till we get to that side, or do you want to share it right now, which is fine. Whatever you want to do, Bob.
Since I already brought it up, I'll just, demisexuality is when people are only attracted to people who they have an emotional connection with. Sapiosexuality is when someone is connected, their mental section is connected to their sexuality. So if you're mentally connected, it's like, like kind of in a way where you're maybe attracted to your really smart professor or your really smart friend. It would be part of the sapiosexuality piece. So just to go back into these places, that there's the physical aspect of intimacy doesn't have to lead to the sexual aspect. Just saying.
Right.
And that's really, really, really important. We hug you and I see you in person, which is, have I ever hugged you in person? I would hug you in person, but that wouldn't be sexual, right? And that
Right.
intimacy is so necessary for our bodies, you know? And energetic intimacy, I mean, you know, when you're like repulsed by someone's energy immediately, you're like, oh God, but you know, and even spiritual intimacy is, you know, when you feel really connected with your spiritual group or with your community that you're building your spiritual lives around. Do you guys know what I'm saying? If you are really understanding this, I invite you to type it in the comment box and just follow along with these levels of intimacy.
Hey, I wonder if you've got a headset or something, Trish, because we are getting some feedback and people are making some comments about the feedback. It's the sound quality is not perfect.
Okay.
So,
take me off screen and I'll be right back.
okay. So let me dive into the next phase here. Thank you for giving us feedback. We appreciate it, and I was noticing it too. So what I wanted to do is share if we get it wrong. So one of the first things that I talked about was emotional intimacy. And one of the major ways that we connect emotionally is through communication. And what happens when we get it wrong is we don't feel heard, understood, or valued. And when we don't feel heard, understood, and valued, we get frustrated, pissed off, hurt. And the harder we try, it tends to make it worse and worse. And we push people further and further away. And then what happens is we end up tripping each other's triggers and end up in a constant conflicts, trust, constant conflicts, eroding trust and intimacy, and it takes days or weeks to recover. So, Trish, I know you went and got your microphone. I was just kind of looking at the downward spiral to hell if we get it wrong when it comes to emotional intimacy. And just so that people get an idea of intimacy, I wanted to give 2 quotes on it. And into me see, like that is a silly little thing, but it's also very powerful. Am I going to let you see into me? It's outside of our comfort zone. And what people don't understand is intimacy is not about comfort. Intimacy is about risk. If I'm having an intimate conversation with you, and I'm going to switch the screen, I am revealing my hopes and fears, my dreams, my desires, you know, my fantasies, and also what terrifies me, my embarrassments, my shame. And can I be with them? Because what drives us in life is the emotions we can be with and the emotions we're trying to avoid. And when I'm being intimate, I'm revealing, peeling away the layers and going, God, I'm really embarrassed about this, or I'm heartbroken, or I'm scared, or I have something I want to try and I'm afraid of asking you. So any thoughts on that one?
Well, if you caught my show this morning, it was all on intimacy. It didn't help the feedback, did it?
Only a little bit.
Well, I don't exactly know how to fix that. But the show this morning, and I'm going to bring it back up, is really about how intimacy is built. And intimacy is built not just with vulnerability, but also humility and spontaneity. And how you build trust is the courage to be authentic and the courage to hold and hear another's truth and to show up in a way that's really generous. So if you tell me something really vulnerable for you and I wipe it off the table, what's that going to look like? The slow road to hell. Right?
Yeah. And the quote I want to bring up, and I want people to be with this quote for a second, and it came from Marshall Rosenberg, and I've got another one of his quotes in a slide, but Marshall said this and it shocked me. And let it shock you for a minute. But he said, intimacy is the ability to enjoy someone else's pain.
Mm.
And I don't know if you've heard that before, Trish, but see, I'm going to explain it so you can be with it. And you can say that sounds crazy and all of it. But before you totally wipe it off, think about it. So Trish, do you enjoy somebody's joy?
Well, that's called compersion in the poly realm.
Right. But for the people who are not quite there yet, do you enjoy someone else's joy? Play with me for a second, normally.
I love and love, love, love to enjoy someone else's joy.
Yeah. And so see what happens though is if I love your joy, but I think that when you're sad, it's bad, then what happens is as soon as you come to me sad, I try to fix you.
Yeah. Or you get really uncomfortable because you can't be with your own sadness.
Right.
And then you want to like push me away because I'm being the human that I am.
And especially if I think I did something that might have triggered your sadness. So I'm uncomfortable with you being uncomfortable. So if you could stop because it's really too much for me. So this is part of the dance. So part of the dance is, can I be with Trish when she's sad, angry, upset, when she's crying, when, whatever it is, that is intimacy with another. The other side, what addiction tends to be, and there's some other love coaches like Heidi Love and Tim that help a lot on that. But addiction is when you can't be intimate with yourself. You can't be with your own sadness. So what do? Alcohol, drugs, TV. And, hey, listen, I'm addicted to Netflix myself. There's plenty of times I try to go unconscious by watching the movie. But it's, can I be intimate with myself when I'm feeling those feelings? Can I be intimate with somebody else? And see, if I can't be intimate with your emotions, that moves into the physical touch. Because a lot of times the way we hug each other is, what is it called? The pyramid hug there, where I barely touch you and do the quick pat on the back, versus like actually feeling your body touch mine, and like letting that go through.
Co-regulation is really important. I've been thinking a lot about co-regulation is what a 20-second hug does. So I'll just explain this. I know that I'm bringing a whole random thing into your
No, this is perfect. This is all about, this is the underlying part of intimacy here is what happens, the co-regulation. That I just want you to catch everybody up with what that term means, because that's moving us from into the physical intimacy part. And that, if you can learn about that, then what happens is it transforms your lovemaking.
Right. So co-regulation is a term where it shows you that the psychological impact of when you regulate with another person's body, breath, and their rhythm. So if you notice that when you hold a baby, that they will automatically rhythm to your breath, that they'll get calmer. It's called co-regulation. So when there's a lot of trauma in childhood or in children, they can get dysregulated, right? Like, oh, I'm feeling, and that's, when they're scared a lot, you hear a lot of this in attachment style systems is like when someone's dysregulated or when they're having a trigger or when they're unable to manage their emotions, that to get them back into that place. Yes, dogs and cats.
We're co-regulating right now. Jazzy said, I want to be part of the show.
Exactly. And so that's a place that we find intimacy, and that's a physical section of intimacy, right? I know that a lot of people can find sexual intimacy really easily with a lot of people, but the level of vulnerability that I think a lot of us are seeking in true connection or in really like deeply intimate, relatable connection is actually through our most sensitive, intimate little like pains. Like we all want to be loved where we hurt the most.
Yeah. And I want to challenge something that you said, just so that for people, and not, it's, some people use sex to avoid intimacy, and some people use sex to take their intimacy deeper.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like part of that co-regulation. It's like when you're intimate with your partner, can you have eyes open kissing? Can you make love? Is the love making, I call it the masculine is the bell curve of lovemaking. So arouse, climax, go to sleep. And if you go to Google, the average man lasts 5 minutes. The average woman to climax lasts 23 minutes. It takes her 23 minutes, and it's a wave versus a bell curve. And so it's like, how can you be intimate and vulnerable in that beautiful space? And co-regulating or breathing together, some of the early practices. You might slow down, you might stop, and you start to breathe together. Some tantric practices where you might start in Yabyung, sitting cross-legged with your partner on your lap. And first, what I recommend, and we bounced into the sexual side, we'll come back to the other side. We'll bounce back and forth. But one of the first things is close your eyes and connect to yourself. Before you try to connect to the other person, find your breathing rhythm. And then you open your eyes and then you find your partner's rhythm. And so you're breathing together. So, and it's easier to follow if you stop at the top and wait for them to catch up. Stop at the bottom. And then you get into a cyclical breath. And it's like as you're exhaling, they're inhaling. And it creates this connection that's far beyond what we can describe here or words. So, Trish, I hand it back to you.
What I think about all of this is that, like, that breathing practice is really slowing down to let the person who's processing the slowest to catch up. And that is really love. That is really an intimate place to be, hey, Paul, I can love you there and I'll wait for you. And how deeply intimate that is. And it's not just in breath or in physicality, but in emotions. Like, oh, you're really pissed right now. I'll just wait for you. And I'll be right here.
That second part was really critical. It's like, rather than, oh, well, I can see you're all upset. It's that time of the month. I'll be outside. I'll wait for you out there versus I'm going to stay here and be
for the next week. You'll wait for me for the next week. Good fucking luck, dude. Enjoy the cold because I'm going to be warm and having ice cream and you're just going to be sad. Just kidding.
So it's like part of the greatest aphrodisiac that I've discovered, I've been working with couples for over 25 years, is the ability to be with.
Yes.
To be with them on their highs, their lows, to be with, like, wow. And 3 magic words. This is especially good for the masculine, but if you're talking to the feminine rarely gets to hear these words. So tell me more.
Yeah.
Now, here's the words that are magic if you want to, for the masculine. You're right about that. You're right. Oh my God. It's like that's crack cocaine for the masculine. It's like, what? What did you say?
I think I know another one. Right? Okay, wait. It goes like this. You're right, and you're my hero.
Oh my God.
Oh!
That just did it for me. I'm good. I'm going to go. It's like, I go have dinner now. I don't need any more. Yeah. Thank you. That's whoo. And see, that's that thing. The feminine wants to be adored and cherished and loved, and the masculine wants to be respected. And what creates passion is polarity. And and I'm not saying, because I have couples that are gay, straight, lesbian couples, but for there to be a lot of passion, there tends to be a need for some level of polarity, like someone's in their masculine, someone's in their feminine.
A good place to be in that polarity and also be really loving, because I know that in some places it can be the feminine can be frustrating for the masculine, or the masculine can be frustrating for the feminine. But something that it can be. I'm saying can. It doesn't have to be. That a practice that I've been working with my lover is, I can love you there. And so when I'm just a hormonal mess, which I can be all over the board in one day, sometimes he'll just be like, wow, I can love you there. And sometimes when he's frustrated with my shit, I'll be like, oh, I can love you there. And it's not, of course, it can't be said in this way that's flippant. And I'm not like, oh, I can love you there. But it's really like, oh, I see that you're having a response, and I can see that you're uncomfortable, but I want you to know that I can love you in that place. And so it's also like, it also sounds like, oh, hey, you're my hero. It also sounds like that. And it's also, it offers safety to whoever you're saying it to. I can love you there too. I can love you in your yay, in your joy. And I can also love you in your sadness or your anger. And it's so inclusive.
Yeah. And see, the thing is, if intimacy was easy, we wouldn't be having this conversation. It's outside of our comfort zone, and it's about how we're communicating with each other, whether we're communicating with our touch, with our words, with our emotions, with how we're being together. And I'm going to bring up, there's 3 different areas. Like we speak from 3 different languages. So Trish, you were saying something about men and women speaking in different languages almost. I don't know if you really are going exactly there, but I speak dude. See, part of the reason I'm so successful as a relationship coach is I'm bilingual. I can speak dude because I spent 18 years as a commercial fisherman in Alaska, and I know how our minds work. And I lived in the business world for years. And I also have a strong feminine, so I can reach in and talk from the heart. And it's like, what we need to do is we need to be trilingual, because there is the communication that comes from the head, from the heart, or from our hurt. And Trish, maybe you'll talk a little bit about the hurt, because if I'm in reaction and it triggers your reaction, and then we end up in the dinosaur spiral, the dinosaur dance, where my reptile brain's dancing with yours and no one gets hurt.
Yeah. Do you want me to speak on that right now?
Yeah, why don't you speak on that for a second, then we'll come back to the other one.
Well, okay. So good, because it's everything that we were talking about today on the Self-Love Show. So there's a certain level of patterning that we run, that we've been taught as children. And this is really what kind of triggers our fight, flight, and freeze, fawn behavior. So we create these patterns, and that's generally where our hurt lives, right? Like, one of my hurts is to be yelled at, like to have someone raise their voice, and that will instantly throw me into it sounds a little like, oh shit, I'm not safe, right? So if someone can show up in the place of like, oh my God, you're afraid. So instead of being like aggressive back, if they relate from their head or their heart, well, mostly from their heart, and just be with me, then I can come back into resonance, into regulation, and be able to relate reasonably as well as from my heart again. So, and I think that happens both ways for both men and women and children and non-binary and all and animals, like whatever you identify as, a puppy, like it can resonate with you, right?
I'm going to do 2 things, Trish. I want to do a quick role play with you, but I just wanted to hear that this is one of our listeners from Canada saying, and it's actually Ashley that said this. She's on James's thing. But anyway, I've never heard tell me more from a man. That's something I'd like. you know.
Well, give it to her right now.
So Ashley, tell me more.
Oh, how did that feel? What does it feel like in your body? Type that in.
And what I want to give people an idea of how to help take somebody, who is in their reptile brain and take them back up into their heart. Oh, and here's her response. Whoops.
Oh,
Hmm.
Ashley, that's really powerful, right? So for all of you watching right now, I think that it's really important to just really acknowledge what happened there. So again, this is the key, right? From going from hurt and from seeing someone hurt and saying, tell me more. I want to hear you. I'm invested in you and I love your feelings. I can love you there. That's the place where someone can really be their amoeba-ish, falling apart, like barely stuck together cells and still be seen and heard.
Yeah.
Vulnerable.
So Trish, can you do a quick role play with me? And I'm going to do it two different ways. I'm going to communicate from my head and from my heart and see what happened. So can you get triggered about anything I did? We'll just make something up, and
Let's use the timepiece from yesterday.
oh, okay.
Last minute stuff really fucking pisses me off.
Well, it shouldn't, because you don't have to take it on, and it's not your job to take it on. So you should just set better boundaries. So why don't I?
Boundaries. Oh, I just built a freaking brick wall, and you know what? It has steel bars in it. Good effing luck getting through that again.
So I just want to have the listeners guess where I was coming from, my head, and how well did it work?
I think it was you're talking from your caboose. Oh.
Yeah. So here, I'm going to try another one.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and go for it again.
In the same way?
Same exact scenario. I want to have people see that there's a different response, and that.
Paul, last minute shit just doesn't work for me.
Wow. Thank you for telling me that. And I'm wondering what it would take to feel safe in this situation with all of these things going on.
Well, I thank you for acknowledging me. I don't feel safe, you're right. And I think that it really, for me to feel safe, just acknowledging that my time is precious. Oh. And that I have like a very full day, that I don't really have time for like another project, but that I want to give it to you, right?
Right. And so I hear a mix. I hear, number one, that you actually want to be able to do things. You want to be able to be generous. And at the same time, you have a time, that you're a very full schedule.
Yeah.
Wow. And now see what happened in the first time, and I'd love to get your response on it, but basically I was telling Trish that how she was feeling wasn't okay, that she should feel a different way. And then I became the enemy. I was no longer the ally, I was the enemy. And she felt like, and I'm speaking for you, but I'm speaking in general, like you had to defend yourself, and actually got even more intense. The second way, I was leaning in and saying, tell me more about how you feel and what's going on. So what was it like for you? And here's what a response out there is. Thank you.
Well, I think what I felt was that, yeah, I had to defend the experience that I was having within me. Like, and nobody wants to do that. Like, nobody wants to defend their inner experience. Like, oh my gosh, I'm having this experience. And you know, there's a fine line between me having to defend my experience and someone gaslighting. So another, oh, you don't have that experience. Why would you have that experience? That's not real. It's happening to me right now, Paul. And so then the second time, it's like, oh my gosh, this person's actually here with me. I don't feel alone. I feel connected. I feel like I'm being heard and seen. And this person wants to create something together with me that's cohesive and coherent and loving. You know, I felt like you saw me, like you were being compassionate. You're like, oh shit, like I didn't realize that was how it impacted you. How can we make it better? Drops the nervous system, immediately gets you out of the reptilian brain, out of the amygdala, into the frontal lobe.
Yeah.
Just like that.
And one sentence, and it's not just the words. If you try it with the words, it's a manipulation, but it's like, it's a caring where I'm slowing down. And what I'm saying is your feelings are more precious than my thoughts right now. And here's one other response. I really did cry there. I didn't actually realize how deep my need was to have people ask me for more, not just men. It's in friendships too. Thanks for this insight. I'm a trained therapist, and that was certainly an aha or ta-da moment. So thank you. And thank you for sharing it. It's so precious. So what I want people to think about is there's 3 different places we're communicating from. Our head, which is all about logic and reason. And in our head, knowledge is key. We're looking for the facts and figures, who did what, who's right, who's wrong, who's good, who's bad, who do we punish, who do we reward.
Can I just say something about this really?
Yeah.
Is that sometimes the spiritual crowd can get really overly like nitpicky about this particular thing. And what I mean by that, and I think you know what I mean by that, Paul, is that it looks like this. Like the we are nothing piece, the spiritual bypassing piece of it's all good. Ooh, it's all good. It's also part of the reasoning head place. That's just negating everything that was. Oh, it's all good. Oh, Paul, it actually doesn't matter in the long run. Like, don't worry about it. That's all reasoning. Okay.
Yeah. And see, I just want to be clear. There's nothing wrong with the head. I go there. You can see my slides. I have training I was a professional problem solver for years. I was a consultant and literally traveled around the world. The city of Albuquerque, their top management all went through my courses on quality, productivity, and leadership. Brilliant stuff if the head follows the heart. The problem is, if you look at it, the head is all about reasoning. The heart is about relating, a love, connection, feelings, needs. Forget the facts. How do you feel? And in the heart, vulnerability is key. And someone's here, and I said, on a personal level, I grew up with taking orders from my father, beating my mother and us kids until I got used to pain. And then after it, I got addicted to pain. I never took orders that I didn't agree with. And until just recently, and then I had to adjust accordingly. And it's like, oh, my heart goes out. And I had a violent brother. My dad was emotionally violent. My brother was physically violent, and he would beat me until I collapsed, emotionally collapsed. And women have a lot, like on this planet, there are a lot of collapse because women have had violence used, both physical, emotional, mental, over them, and
sexual.
And sexual.
Men too, trans,
yes.
LGBTIQ plus people as well, just for being different.
Yeah. And it takes such courage to stand up and to let go of the past and to be healed and to forgive. And I'm going to go to another slide here in a second that will address some of this. And I love how interactive people are in this call. Like, my heart goes out to you guys sharing from your hearts, and Trish and I are sharing from ours. So
I want to speak to this, but keep going.
Go for it. And I'm going to do something really vulnerable. I'm going to mute myself and blow my nose. So,
well, the thing about getting addicted to pain is that as children, we understand that it looks like that's what we think is as love, right? So children have this really amazing thing that they do, that they're trying to figure out reality. And so they have magical thinking. And in some cases, it would be considered tragical thinking. So when you're young and you're being beaten all the time, it becomes this like weird, like, I know it's wrong, but this is what they say, they love me. So this must be love. And so then you recreate that all in your whole life, including your intimate relationship coming forward. The good thing about all of this is that it doesn't have to live that way any longer. You can literally choose right now, today, to work with a coach and a therapist, to move from your reacting into your heart.
Yeah, and the thing that I want to talk about is you don't have to be broken to do this. If you think about almost any athlete has a coach, has a mentor. It was like, when it comes to sexual intimacy, my first experiences as a very young man were embarrassing. I'll be vulnerably embarrassing. Like, I lasted 2 minutes with this woman I had this young woman who had a total crush on, and I literally spent the next 20 years trying to make up for those 2 minutes. And men don't talk to other men about this. They talk about all of their big scores and how badass they were or how many women they've been with. They don't talk about their shame and embarrassment. And it took over 20 years for me to discover someone who turned that all around. His name is Charles Muir. He teaches about Tantra and sacred sexuality. And it was like I went to one of his courses with my ex-wife, and it was like all of a sudden I went, oh my God, that you can actually learn this. You can learn intimacy. Intimacy is a muscle and a skill. It's a muscle you can build, and it's a skill you can learn, and you get a coach. And if you think about somebody like Trish here, she's a coach in the world of intimacy, and you can learn something. And it was like I had so much shame that even after 20 years, I discovered Charles. It took me 5 more years after I discovered him to actually take the advanced course, to really go, okay, I want to learn this stuff. And that's 25 years of suffering and miserable, in a lot of ways, lovemaking that could have been very different. But my shame and ego and all that got in the way. And it's like, wow, I grieve that loss. And I just talked to somebody last week who, like, they said on their honeymoon night, they knew they were in trouble. That was 13 years ago. And he's never been able to deal with the shame of it. So they have had not as good a love life for the last 13 years.
And
it breaks my heart.
I think that there's a lot of people who carry a lot of sexual shame. A lot. Like, women are terrified of the smell of their vagina, Paul. Like, we're taught to not like the look of it or the smell of it or to touch it. And boys are taught to be penetrative and fierce and touch it all the time. Like, and then we have these experiences where you're young and you're like excited and you don't know what to do. And then you're like, oh God, I don't know. Women will carry like shame around their first time too, because they didn't know what to do. And it's such a horrible place. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your vulnerability with everyone.
Yeah, and it's like, it's so important because it's like the communication often is more about bragging than saying, wow, I'm confused. And here's a tip for the bedroom. Be curious. Decide one night a week that, honey, just teach me about your body. Rather than me coming in thinking I know it, I'd like you to teach me about it. How do you like to be touched? How do you like all of this different stuff? And see, what happens is that's a level of vulnerability for both people. And this is the emotional, physical, sexual intimacy, all wrapped up in that. And there's even another exercise, Trish, and then I'll hand it back to you. But it's take a 10-minute timer, and on your date night, 10 minutes of whatever you want, you just tell me. And as long as it's like within whatever reason is for the two of you, I will give you 10 minutes. And we have a lot of shame around our pleasure and about asking for it. And I just one of our participants just said, and I want to be gentle with everybody else, but he saying he got raped by a priest in a church. So I've never been aggressive. So it's like, and that's the most vulnerable aspect. And it's like, I watched growing up, my dad was that mix. He was Irish, alcoholic, strong, capable, smart man, and had a creative side to him. But I watched when he get triggered, his thing was the best defense is a strong offense. And my mom still does, strong femininity. And like her heart is so open, she could cry at an ad, and she's such a good person. And I watched my dad use his masculinity against my mom, and I said, I never want to do that. So I was lost. But I also saw that being feminine like my mom made me incredibly vulnerable. So that wasn't safe. So there was no place to land. I ended up leaving home at 17, going to Alaska to try to figure myself out. But it's like we're dealing with these pains and violations, and it's like part of this whole process is the healing process. So thank you for sharing so vulnerably here.
Oh, thank you for sharing. It's so that's so scary and painful not to be able to trust your masculine or your feminine, not to feel safe in those places.
And not the other thing that he said, though, is not to trust your feminine, your masculine, but also not to trust your parents, the church, the schools. It's like a lot of these places that are supposed to protect us don't. And now it's learning how to be vulnerable again and not punishing our current partner for the sins of the past. But it's also knowing how to be with vulnerability, because I'll just tell you, in Tantra and in making love, a lot of times guys, I'll speak for guys here, it can be the same for women though, but if you really make love to your woman in a really sweet way, there can be sobbing, there can be tears, I can crack her heart open. And don't think you did something wrong. Be with her. Put your hand on her heart. Go, I got you. Let it out. Your feelings are safe here. This is a safe place to feel that, and create that environment. And it can go both ways. The guys can get into their heart too, especially if they've been through what this guy just was saying, been through.
The thing about intimacy is really what I'm hearing here. And I'm certain that you all have probably heard it or seen it somewhere. And Paul, I'm sure that you've spoken about it, is that really a level of vulnerability is to show up for the other person and love them in their trigger. So knowing someone's trauma and handling it in kindness and compassion is actually a high form of love. Like, hey, I see you in that trauma, in that trigger. I want to love you there too. I want to love you there. And I want you to feel safe with me. So how can I be a safe feminine for you? Or how can I be in my aggressive masculine and be okay for you there? How can
Yeah,
I invite you as your masculine? You
what
know?
what you brought up is this dance, because there's been so much tension around the masculine as aggressor, that a lot of men have lost their growl. Now there's something that's very sensuous about a man who's got his growl and can like, I'm going to take you, but there's consent. And it's so I'm almost shy of even saying it, but there is a whole world that you can learn in this dance of intimacy.
This is what my work is. I actually work with a lot of men around dating and intimacy and connection and how to be safe masculine. Um, uh, I'm really close with a men's integrity coach who also works in this, and he's fabulous. Like, this is the work in the world. Like, how does a woman or a man feel safe in their femininity? How does a woman or a man feel safe in their masculinity and be able to be met in that place?
Oh, well, just we must have cracked open something here, Trish. I don't know if you've read the latest thing, but I just got out of a long-term relationship. Prior to him, I didn't have sex for 7 years, as I was drugged, raped, and beaten by a pharmacist. I trusted my partner, but he was not honest, and he stayed online dating sites during our relationship, etc. I felt I risked everything opening up to him sexually. I'm unsure if he cheated or just looked, but now I'm feeling scared and to engage sexually. What would you advise? Well, so first place, thank you even for saying that. And what I would love to do is, if you want to talk to either Trish or myself, whoever you resonate with, we'll do like I do a 45-minute session just to find out where you are, where you want to go, what's in the way, and give you some ideas. And so it would be good to reach out and have somebody kind of coach you through it, because I'm going to kind of give a big picture here, Trish, of how I even look at relationships, and then we will look at winding it up. And at the end, I'm going to give Trish's website and my website. So the big picture here is, and I've spent 25, almost 30 years creating this page. This single page is like taking all my wisdom. And what we're looking for, if we're looking for lasting love here in the center, it's a combination of availability, capability, and willingness. And availability comes from clearing up the past. If we don't clear up the past, we're not available to be present. And this is exactly what she just said in there, that the past is in the present and it's limiting the possibilities for the future. So what do we want? We want skills that can help us clear up the past so it's no longer in the present and we feel well equipped rather than underprepared. The thing about relationships is there's the heart set, the skill set, the mindset. I know this might look complicated. It's actually pretty simple once you go through it more than once. In the heart set, in a relationship, your friends, your partners, your lovers, and in each of those, you're trying to meet your precious needs. And a lot of times we live in a culture that has need shame. And we're taught that our needs are a burden versus precious. And if you think of a little kid, they see their needs as precious. So anything you want to say about those two before I hit on the third one, Trish?
Well, I actually want to address, is it Ashley, right? But I can do that in a minute. You can go ahead.
All right. The last one is the mindset, and I call it your ROS, your relationship operating system, made up of your habits, patterns, and beliefs. And the problem is those are all subconscious, and we're either set up to sabotage or support. And it's like we have so many people that are out there in pain right now and haven't healed it. And until you're willing to feel it, it's really hard to heal it. So this is a quick overview. I'm about to, starting in late February, do a whole workshop and spend 90 days going through this model and help people find the 7 skills that they need and look at their feelings and needs and requests and learn the language of love and look at their unconscious patterning. Are they set up to sabotage or support the relationship? So what are your final thoughts here?
Well, I just want to speak to Ashley specifically.
Okay, great. Let me get rid of the screen then. Let me just.
I can wrap it all up in with that too.
Oh, okay.
So Ashley, I was raped twice in my early teen years. When I was 17 and when I was in maybe 24, by really close people that I knew. I also had recently kind of continued to develop relationships with people who were abusive like my parents were. And so it is very hard to find the ways to be safe with other people. And for me, what that took was a level of commitment to being incredibly intimate with myself. Not sexually, sometimes sexually. Like sometimes I had to step forward, but it took me really looking at and acknowledging my own emotions and being with them. It's taken massive therapy and it's taken massive coaching. And what worked for me most is when I had a therapist and a coach at the same time. My therapist was really holding me in a lot of my childhood stuff, and my coach was really holding me to what I wanted, and was it was a beautiful, like I couldn't even have it. It was just amazing for me. I couldn't have fathomed how that impacted my life. And then I started to, work with Love Coach Academy and really started looking at relationship skills like Paul Sterling. So when I finally dealt with my past with other people, you don't have to do it alone. I just want to say that I had to work with my past so I could get really present, so I could actually be with the people. And don't worry, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's still stuff that like comes up in my relationship now. I'm not full on triggered and it's not a full on breakdown every time someone's close to me. But I had to get really here so I can be like, oh, hey, that thing that you said, or when you raise your voice, it makes me have a full on freak out in my body. And I need a little space to calm down again. And if I get a trigger, can you put me in the hot bath? Or can you just calm down enough, put my head to your chest? Like there's ways that you can help people love you. And so it's setting them up for success to love you. And that's the possibilities.
Yeah. And Trish, so beautiful. And it's like you nailed it in that sentence. Set people up to win with you. We normally set them up to lose. And until you get over like need shame, it's hard to ask for what you're wanting and needing and make requests because you have so much shame. So you don't set them up to win, but you get upset with them when they don't do it. So what I'd love to do is I'd love to hear, what did you get from today? And then I'm going to tell you, so if you could just type in what you got from today.
Yeah.
And that would be awesome. And then Trish, do you want to just tell a tiny bit about your work and your website?
Yeah. So I'm a self-love and codependency coach, as well as a certified sex coach. So I work with people's sexuality breakdowns, how they feel about it, their relationships to it, dating, all of that. And I'm really here to show up in the places where people abandon themselves, aka codependency. My website, you can find me at embodied-happiness.com. You can also find me on the self-love show.
Wait, say that again.
embodiedhappiness.com. I'll put it in for you.
Okay, yeah, put it in for us.
And you can also find me on the self-love show every Thursday morning, giving tips and tools for deeper self-love and deeper love and connection and relationships. Here, let me put it in for you because you have to put it in.
All right. And the other thing, Trish, is that we're both work with this guy, Scott Katamas, who runs Love Coach Academy. Amazing. Shout
Yeah.
out to Scott and to Love Coach Academy. So if you ever need to find either of us and you can't find us somehow on Facebook, because we're here, we're like all over the place, but that's a place that you can find a coach. And Scott's shows are amazing. And so anyway, Trish, if you want to get a hold of her and say your one last time in
Embodied dash happiness. I put it in our private chat if you can post it in the comments.
Oh, okay. It's in our private chat. I will post it on there. All right. And then, oh, I see it. There we go. Let's see if this works. Copy, paste.
Yeah.
All right. What people can do if they resonate with this and they want to find out what's going on for themselves, I do something I call a breakthrough session. It's actually more like 30 to 45 minutes. And what happens is we get clear on where you are, where you want to go, what are the roadblocks, and if and how I can help you. So I spend those 40 minutes together, and people have told me that they get more out of those 40 minutes than they did out of months and months of the traditional relationship therapy. And that is complimentary. So if you want that, you can put breakthrough here, or you can go and schedule it there. Now, to help me help you, you have to go through a survey process, watch a video, and go read some testimonials before we meet, because I want you, as Trish already said, I want you set up to win. And I want to understand your side, and if you're in a relationship, your partner's side. So I get a bigger picture. My job isn't to take sides, but it's to give you better tools to transform your relationship. So, all right. And you can get a hold of me at arguelesslovemore.net / if you want a session, it's / clarity. The book, it's an Amazon bestseller. Thank you so much, Trish, and thank you everybody for sharing from your hearts. It was here's the last one I'll show. Yeah, and it's how honest. Honesty is not an off-on switch. Like you're not totally honest, you're not totally dishonest. It's like, how much honesty can I tell myself? How much can I share with my partner? So how much intimacy? So
for someone to be honest with you.
Yeah. We teach people how to communicate with it. There's so much more. I am Thursday nights, 6:05 to 7:05 West Coast time, and Sundays from 4:05 to 5:05. Trish, you've got your calls are what time, just so that we got it and then we're done?
It's at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
All right. And thank you, everybody. So have an awesome day.
Thank you so much for having me on.
You're welcome.